So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Asians in Advertising today. This is a huge treat to have Jessalin Lam present today. Today's event is called Network with Ease. So this will be a hands-on event where we'll actually workshop ways to kind of improve your network system. So, all those times that, we have joined a mentorship program or, worked with people that we really admire. It's like, how do you keep those connections like working for you and really help you with your career? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessalin to introduce herself.
Great. So hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Asians in Advertising event on Network with Ease. And as just a quick introduction for myself, I'm the co-founder of Asians in Advertising with Bernice, and I'm currently the VP of Member Development and Diversity at the Interactive Advertising Bureau, where I lead learning and development and DEI. And I'm also on the advisory board for the RISE journey. So I did want to just remind everyone that if you have any questions throughout this workshop, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll monitor that to make room for the questions at the end. And for today's workshop, the learning objectives will be for all of you to unlearn hindering cultural barriers, build a network of allies, mentors, and advocates, create a toolkit on how to connect with people, and leave with some conversation starters and tactics to build lasting connections. And as Sally Krawcheck says here, networking is the #1 unwritten rule of success in business. And business networking is the process of meeting others to exchange information, make new professional contacts, and create helpful relationships. 85% of jobs are filled by networking. And so these relationships are useful when you're looking for a new job, developing your skills, increasing your industry knowledge, and knowing how to network professionally will make it easier and faster for you to form valuable relationships. And that's why you're all here today, to really hone in on your networking skills. And even when I was looking at this fact, I was even assessing my own career journey. And it looks, I think about 55% of my jobs actually have been from networking, whether it was through a client of mine or someone in my network referred me. So definitely being able to have these skills could set you up for success for your career. And this is another fun way to look at networking. So for me, I wanted to share this with you. The first Bitmoji on the left here, consider networking like planting a seed. And you're growing your own garden to blossom within time. And so that's one way of thinking about how you're growing your own garden and blossoming things and those relationships that you have in your life. And the other one on the right here, you could think of networking like your own bank. And that's where relationships are part of your own social currency. And so these relationships are like a treasure chest full of opportunities. And for me, I started networking when I was in college. And I remember I used to think it was really weird to strike up a conversation with a stranger or just a random person. But networking is a skill that anyone has the capacity to learn. As long as you take the time to practice and prioritize it, you can really strengthen it like a muscle, where the more you work on it, the better and stronger you will become at it. And so I did want to customize this workshop for us to be aware of our own cultural barriers that may be an obstacle for us. So let's have all of you share what some of your cultural barriers you face as obstacles when networking. So you can either go to menti.com and use the code 33863506 or scan the QR code with your phone, and then it'll put it in anonymously for what your responses are. I'll give everyone a few minutes to fill this in, and then I'll share my screen to show the responses from everyone. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, I'm just dragging this over as you all start filling this in. Okay, so let's see. I see anxiety, imposter syndrome, not being able to share accomplishments, being humble, feeling like I'll be bothering people if I ask for a favor or strike a conversation with strangers, worries I'll come across weird. Yep, that's definitely how I felt when I first started networking. Having no role models in my industry to follow. Don't know where to find the networks. We'll definitely be covering that today. A fear of sparking conversations. I'll be sharing some conversation starters for you. Coming off as I want to use them to get ahead in my career. We will definitely cover ways for it to be a mutually beneficial. Being intimidated, and I see imposter syndrome. Following up, seeming needy. Okay. Great. So we will be covering a lot of this. So it's great to hear. And thank you everyone for filling this out. Let me just move back to the screen. Okay, so the reason I wanted you all to reflect on it is because it's important for us to also have self-awareness of where we're starting with when it comes to the networking, and everyone may be at a different level of where you're starting with for networking. And when it comes to Asian cultural barriers, here are some that I found online about understanding the cultural differences between Asian culture and Western culture. So in Asian culture, we may often not talk about the problems, keep secrets. We don't express as much emotions or choose silence or even be humble. So when it comes to the Western culture, they embrace and encourage people to solve problems and talk about it and be honest, welcome emotions, and have the freedom of speech. So here I wanted to share just some tips for how you can unlearn these cultural barriers to really help with networking. And those would be to share your challenges, be honest and transparent, embrace vulnerability, invite yourself to take up space, and improve your communication skills. So I'll share a few personal examples here for sharing your challenges and being honest. I'll share an example of how I was catching up with someone in my network and letting them know how I was doing at a previous job and that it was going okay, but I wasn't really happy in the job. He mentioned he was hiring at his company, but he wasn't sure if he could afford me. And since it was a trusted contact, I actually shared my salary with him, and he said he wasn't able to afford me. But then he said he could hire me if I started my own LLC, and they would be able to hire me with my LLC to write training courses for them. So then a few months later, I decided to create my own LLC, actually just last year, and they guaranteed me my first gig where I worked on a training script for one of their courses. So you never know where the opportunity could open by just being transparent with where your goals are and what you bring to the table. So that's an example of how I was able to create an opportunity from just networking with someone. And for improving communication skills, I practice my elevator pitch every time I get a new job. And it helps just to see how it sounds out loud. And even when you're connecting with people, in case you want to be able to craft it and improve how you're telling your own story. And I also read a lot of resources and take trainings to elevate these kind of skills. So that's definitely something that can easily be improved in terms of how you're communicating, and you can incorporate that into your networking. And then now we can talk about how to grow your network. So this is where we talk about, where do we even begin? Like, who do you even talk to, or where do you get started? And so for this, think of networking as more about farming than it is about hunting down people. It's really about cultivating those relationships And for Asians, it isn't always culturally in our nature to ask those we don't know for help or mentorship. And however, foregoing connections and building bridges is essential for upward mobility. So keep that in mind, that the key to unlocking opportunities is really nurturing those relationships. And so here is a starting point for the types of people you could look to invest in your own network. So look for mentors. Those are people who are like a sounding board that will be able to share career advice to you. Then there's sponsors. These are people who would create opportunities for you to succeed towards your goals. Just like the example I shared with you about my contact who hired me for my LLC, that's an example of a sponsor creating those opportunities. Then there's advocates. Those are people who mention your name when you're not in the room and have your best interest. And then you have cheerleaders. Those are people who champion you and keep you motivated and to keep you going. And then there's connectors. You definitely want to have someone like this in your network to connect you to people in theirs to help you easily expand your connections. And then I originally was going to do breakout rooms, but I think we can, how many people do we have? I think we actually could still do a breakout room. So we're going to do a breakout room and we'll have you share with each other to just share among yourselves of the types of people that are already in your network and who are the types of people you need to start cultivating relationships with. And that can be mentors, sponsors, advocates, cheerleaders, connectors, or even another type of person that it may not be listed here. I think people are joining in a few seconds. Awesome. Great. Welcome back, everyone. How was that? I definitely would love to hear from some of you. Feel free to, I think you have the option to unmute yourself.
I can go for our room.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what my room we were saying is like some of us do have mentors and like advocates or like cheerleaders and all that, but a lot of it, some of the people in our team there were a few. I think Aaron said he's very new, and the person that reaches out to him to be a mentor is like a C-suite level. So there's like a huge vast indifference, and so they find it like a little intimidating to reach someone who's like that much higher than them. So that was one of the topics we talked about in our room, and the other one was that a lot of the mentors and or whatever we have are white, and there is a lack of diversity in that. So that was like two takeaways I had, but I don't know if anyone from my room wants to add to that.
Thanks for sharing that. I do have an example about how to reach someone at a higher level later, so we'll save that for later. Does anybody else want to share from I don't know if you remember the room numbers or anyone can share.
I think our breakout room was number 3. I could totally be wrong though, but it was really cool to see the different types of roles that all of us spanned across, even being agency side or holding company. What I thought was really insightful was going through these questions and listening to everyone sharing made me reflect on, well, what role am I currently playing and what do I offer other people, which is quite introspective. So I appreciate the space to discover that.
Yeah, and you definitely can be more than one. I mean, well, I remember when the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, I actually want to lean into this one more. Or so it's definitely interesting to reflect on the people in your own network and like what you're saying of like how you are to people in your network. Anybody else want to share? No worries if you don't want to. You can even feel free to put more questions or messages in the chat. So I'm gonna move forward to the next slide because I do have a lot to share. Okay, so networking toolkit. So I do want to help you all create your own networking toolkit. And now that you know the type of people you want to add to your network, let's talk about how to connect to these people, where to find them, what to say in that initial outreach, some conversation starters, and then lastly, some ways to nurture those relationships. So for how to connect with people, it definitely can be intimidating when you might not know where to start. And so here are some suggestions of where you can find people that you might be interested in connecting with to have more of a strategy behind the networking. So the first example is follow them on social media. This is really the best way to see what kind of content they're sharing and engage with them, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, and then you'll be able to see what interests that they have even beyond just their professional journey as well. Then there's also attending their speaking events. This is a great way to do that, where there's so many free webinars these days, or even just conferences that you can see someone speak. And one example that I do when I attend events is that I'll tweet the speaker and then share the insights that they're sharing. And oftentimes they'll retweet it. And so if you do end up reaching out to them after the event, they'll remember you because not many people do that, or just it'll be easier for them because you're top of mind. And then another way could be reading their books that they're writing, or articles that they're featured in, or even podcasts that they're featured as speakers for people that you admire, or joining industry organizations, or even communities like you're all here for Asians in advertising as one example of a community, but there's so many others throughout our industry. And then be active in your alumni association. That is a great network that you can tap into of people that maybe even are alumni of your college that work at companies that you want to work at. So that can be an easy way to just hear their experience and be able to connect with them there. So these are only a few examples of how to connect with people. And I'll actually share a success story with one of my mentees from APIA Scholars. She took my advice to attend an industry webinar, and she sent a note to one of the speakers requesting to have a virtual one-on-one. And then she landed an internship with them this past summer. So I'm really proud of her because you never know where opportunities could be created. And this is why I really encourage all of you to be very intentional with who you are connecting with and proactive in how you're connecting with people. So I do want to pause here and just ask everyone, like, are there other ways that you connect with new connections that's not listed on here? Feel free to put it in the chat, and then that can help everyone be able to learn from each other. And I see that Keith is asking to get the name of people that are here. So what I would actually recommend, so that all of you can stay in touch, is make sure you're adding yourself to the networking deck. I think Bernice put it in the chat earlier, where it's just a networking deck specifically for the attendees here to make sure you can connect and learn more about each other. So as long as you have that there, you're able to stay in touch even after this event.
Yeah. Sorry. Speaking about our room, I was in the room with Sean, and we were having a good conversation in that particular room. So, sorry, but yeah, that was. So.
Got it. Great. Let's see. Talking to strangers while grabbing coffee, being at the grocery store, waiting at the bar while your friends are running late, asking existing mentors if they connect you with people, reaching out to former colleagues. Amazing. See, it sounds like a lot of you are really good at networking already. These are definitely great ways. So, I mean, feel free to keep sharing resources and things that have worked for you in the chats, because it would be great for you to all be able to learn from each other of what's worked well for you. So now I want to move on to that initial outreach. So oftentimes we don't know what to say. So like, what do you want to do in your initial outreach? And here's my recommendation for what to include in that initial outreach. So the key things I would say is name. I put this one on here because You would think it's simple to remember, but so many people get my name wrong, or they copy and paste a template and use the wrong name when they're sending me a message. So please don't be one of those people, and make sure you're double checking when you're sending someone a note, whether it's LinkedIn, email, or however you're reaching out to them. And then the next one is source. So share how you found them, whether it's from the example we discussed earlier for how to connect with someone, or if someone referred you to them, let them know how you're reaching out to them. Share who you are. This is where brevity is key, where you are pitching yourself in a few words in the message to them, and then share why you're reaching out. So why would they want to hear from you? You have to make sure you share that with them. And then the call to action is really important. Make sure to include the call to action. And so here is an email template that you could use or revise in your own words and ensure that it's mutually beneficial. So on the left here, you can see I put an example to put in the name, source, who you are, why, and the call to action. On the right here, this is a real example where I was actually reaching out to a lot of chief learning officers on LinkedIn message to expand my own network of CLOs. And this is actually the example. I think someone was mentioning how to reach out to people in a higher level than you. So this is the example. I reached out to them, and I even created an Excel sheet so I can personally track who I was reaching out to, what date, and if I heard back from them. So this was an example where there was a chief learning officer. I saw that she was awarded the CLO of the year from CLO Media, which is a publication for learning and development. I reached out to them, told them I'm a learning and development director, and that I was actually taking a course for a CLO accelerator, and that I'm aspiring. So my why is like, I'm an aspiring CLO. I would love to learn from you and your career story. And my call to action was scheduling a call. So this was honestly the template I used for probably about a dozen CLOs that I sent LinkedIn messages to, and maybe 2 responded, which is totally okay. I was happy that I was able to schedule even any of these calls with these CLOs. And so this is a way that you can try to make that work depending on who you're trying to connect with. And so feel free to create your own templates too, because it makes it easier when it comes to reaching out to new people. And then for conversation starters, in case you need some suggestions on what you could talk about in your meeting, here's a great starting point where you could discuss goals, challenges, resources, your career journey, or even asking about their career journey, some common interests that maybe you even found on their social media that they posted about, or some industry news, just to make sure that it helps you also make you sound smart, that you're keeping up with what's happening in the industry, that you can ask them what they think about, or even a source to mention the source of how you heard about the event, or how you know them, or maybe you have a mutual connection with them. So these are only a snapshot of some examples, and you could definitely come up with your own, driven by your own curiosity, your own role, or just your own goals of what you're looking to do throughout your career. And for nurturing the relationships, this is my favorite part of networking. And so let's say you now had that first meeting with them, and you met them at an event. So remember I said earlier that the key to unlocking opportunities is nurturing the relationships. These are some examples for how you could do this. So the first one here is be a giver. Think about how you could help this person with their goals, and share opportunities that they could benefit from. And be thoughtful. So remember things about your contacts that you want to stay in touch with. For example, I've sent holiday cards to mentors to stay in touch with, or LinkedIn has that notification. I actually just recently discovered it, that you could turn on notifications to know when people's birthdays are. And you'd be surprised that these little things really matter, because if you're only reaching out to someone when you want something, you definitely won't be as successful, because why would you want someone to do that to you? So consider that too when you're reaching out to people in your network. And then the next one here is be intentional when it comes to scheduling time to catch up. So for me, I make sure there are people in my network that I want to catch up with, and I'll be intentional about it and be strategic by saying, for example, I schedule monthly catch-ups with specific people in my network who I know I want to stay in touch with. Or you could also easily email them to say that you're in career transition or you'd love to brainstorm with them on options to get their advice. And then the last one here is be a connector. So your connections are really that social currency, and be careful with who you exchange your contacts with. When you do find synergy in people you do benefit from, then feel free to offer that connection to them. And then another way to do this is building a community. So for example, I pivoted my career from marketing to learning and development about 5 years ago. I felt like I didn't have a lot of context in learning and development. So I started hosting my own monthly meetups with learning and development context in my network. And it really helped to grow my relationships and be able to share knowledge, challenges, and opportunities with those people. So there are definitely ways for you to be able to expand your own network. And then this one is to remind you all to be creative in how you're nurturing relationships. So these are some fun examples that I wanted to share with you. The first one is I love origami, and in the past I've created origami hearts and cranes, and I included them in handwritten thank you notes to people just to nurture that relationships and show that appreciation for them. And then the middle one here, this intern of ours at one of my previous agencies, she actually illustrated each individual on the team as a thank you. And it was amazing because that was her way of showing gratitude for the whole team. And definitely the first time I've had someone illustrate me. And then another example on the right here is that I had a mentee that sent me this really thoughtful gift of being a great mentor during my birthday this year. So there are definitely fun ways that you can be creative to really stand out, and the context will definitely remember you for that. And then the last thing I did want to leave with you is a reminder how to build lasting connections. So some of the best practices I would say is to actively listen, ask questions, show gratitude, keep track of your contacts. For example, I actually had a friend I was talking to about how I'm building this workshop for all of you. They were saying that they have their own Excel sheet that they write down people that they stay in touch with, and they actually take notes, like when this person's birthday is, or if they're doing an Ironman or whatever it is, and they will remember it and then reach out to that person and be like, oh, good luck with that, or whatever. And I was like, wow, that's pretty intense. And he was like, yeah, you probably were on that list like a long time ago, but now I've known him for so long. So find a way that works for you of how you want to track it, even if it's in a journal, a Word document, because that will help you be able to track who you want to intentionally nurture relationships with. And then ask for introductions. So once you have a good rapport with somebody, you can even trust them to say like, oh, I would love to meet someone who is a creative. Do you know anyone in your network that you can connect me to? And that's a way to easily grow your network from that. And then I do want to remind you all with this quote from Cleo Wade that reminds you to share your shine. Our world needs more of that. And like, in other words, it's reminding you to really be yourself and really stay true to who you are when you're connecting with others. And while you're doing this process of networking and talking to people, like definitely don't forget to be kind to yourself and appreciate who you are. And as you continue your journey, like don't compare yourself to others. We're all at a different step, and it can take baby steps of like the networking skills, and maybe create goals for yourself if you want to start networking with maybe 3 new people a month, whatever works for you, to just start building that skill of networking. And I know networking can be scary, but as I mentioned earlier, think of it like a muscle and a skill that you're capable of building and making stronger by practicing it. And then I did want to leave you with this. So if you can scan the QR code or go to this link, it will lead you to a checklist that I created for this workshop of just reminders of what you can do when it comes to networking. And I know we have 15 minutes left because I want to make sure we had room for questions. I feel like I sped through it because it was really difficult for creating a 1-hour workshop on networking. And I know some of our board members were suggesting maybe we could even break this down into series. So if you are interested in that, let us know, because we would be open to doing that for future events too. So I'm gonna stop my screen so I can let you all ask some questions. Or I know Bernice was tracking some questions that people were putting in the chat.
This was so amazing, Jessalin. Thanks for putting this together. And I just scanned the QR code. So I love that there's a mobile friendly checklist. I'm like, that's so great. Cause I was like screen capping while you were talking. So it's really nice that it's all succinct in one place. And I can't not believe you like actually put together a spreadsheet that's so organized and so like you. I was like, oh my gosh. I sometimes just send them out and I'm like, I cross my fingers and I hope to hear back. So it's really great that you're like so organized with it. And I love that you gave that template of like what to say, how to say it, and kind of create that structure. I also screenshot that because I thought that was really amazing to kind of have in the back of your mind. I do think the people that do add me and they actually write something about me in there, like they looked at my portfolio, they looked at my resume, or there's like a reason for us to have something in common, I always find really helpful. Like, oh, so this first conversation we're going to talk about, we could talk about X. Like we could talk about, us both being creatives, or us both being on the agency side, or, just that little sticky piece that I don't like have that virtual coffee and I'm like, what are we going to talk about? Like, sometimes you go to the virtual coffee and you're like, you start because you don't know what to talk about. So I think that's also super helpful when connecting. There was a question I saw earlier about how you are on an advisory board, and how did you come to be on that?
Oh yeah, I think I saw that question from Judy. So actually that came from networking. So the advisory board opportunity came from networking because of the learning and development meetups that I was part of. Prior to me hosting it, there was someone else in my network who was hosting these monthly meetups. And then due to job changes, she stopped doing it. So I started hosting it. And I invited a lot of those people, including, I'm not sure if Nikki is still here. She was one of those people I met through that networking group. And then I had a friend that Jess, who was part of it, stayed in touch with her, and she was in learning and development. And she actually invited me to be on the advisory board because she's part of the team of this company called The Rise Journey, where they help a lot of people with HR, DEI, learning and development. And so this is why networking can create all these opportunities that you wouldn't even know exist out there.
I'd love to add something about what you said about don't just always go to someone when you need something. I have a quick story of a past assistant that I helped get a different role within an agency, and he went on in a completely different career path and is very successful. But over the years, when we were at different agencies and he needed advice, career advice or whatever it is, he'd hit me up and go, hey, can I bring you some lunch? I'm like, sure. And so we'd meet up, he'd bring me, he's like, what do you want for lunch? And, and so he'd bring me lunch, we'd have lunch together, and he'd kind of pick my brain about his next career move or whatever career advice he needed. And I've never had anyone else do that I've mentored over the years, where he just a simple lunch. And I mean, we're friends now, so we just meet for lunch for whatever reason, but it goes a long way because it makes you feel like, all right, he wants to pick my brain about whatever, but, and then later on in years past, I was interested in a role in his company that he landed at, and he completely helped me out. He gave me all these great pointers, got me an interview. And so it's a two-way street, karma does, come back in positive ways.
Thanks for sharing that story. And that's also a great reminder for all of you to think about when you're connecting with people, to think about how can I help them? So that two-way street is really important in order to really nurture those relationships.
So there's another question that I feel like, we're kind of seeing multiples of, is how do you keep that connection from keep going, right? How do you fall into that loop of not being able to find time or meet, or they initially respond and they don't respond back, or, what is that overall cadence of keeping in touch?
So I think so I'll give the example. I know I see Aaron's comment about sure, holidays and birthdays are great, but you'd be surprised. I'll share an example with someone I crafted to be my mentor strategically without having to say it. So when I was working for a company called Multicultural Marketing Resources, we had a lot of different DEI clients. And one of them worked at Y&R at the time, which back then I was like, oh, my dream job. I thought I wanted to work there. And so I stayed in touch with this contact and scheduled coffee meetings with them in person. And now it's been probably 7 years since I've known her. And in order to nurture that relationship, when I sent that thank you card or even the holiday card, she would actually email me and say, thank you so much for the holiday card. Hope you and your husband are doing well. And then I would respond, let's catch up. So then that's our the trigger of let's catch up. And then there are other ways. For example, with that same contact, I'll actually share with you. She's the DEI lead now actually for VML Y&R, Tasha Gilroy. She's one of my favorite mentors. And she also likes to look for opportunities to help her employees. So when I was on the board of the Advertising Club of New York, there were speaking opportunities. So I would let her know, is there anyone at your agency that would want to speak on this panel? Or I was also a member of She Runs It, and they had nominations for the Educational Loan Relief Award or Working Mother Awards. And I would ping it to her to let her know, hopefully you can nominate someone at your company for this. So thinking of ways that would help benefit them and their goals, because then they're like, wow, this person is so resourceful. They're going to come back to you and then ask you how can I help you? So that's one example. And then another example I have is actually, there was a contact early on in my career I wanted to stay in touch with. And so I remember when I met with him, he mentioned he was on a board of a nonprofit. So at the time it was early on in my career, I had extra time on my hands. So I asked him about his nonprofit and asked to volunteer for it. And after volunteering for his nonprofit for a year, he was like, how can I help you? I can connect you to people in my network, let me know. And I still stay in touch with him till this day. And it's been 8 years. So there are strategic ways of how you can still stay in touch. So it's just coming up with them and trying to think of what are the ways that you can tap into it. And I think finding out what their goals are is important. What's interesting to them and what their values are.
I love this question of how do you ask for their physical address without sounding creepy?
I know that's the hard part. Well, I would say you definitely have to build rapport with them first, because if I just met you and you're like, what's your address? It's so I would say definitely wait until you have a few meetings with them maybe. And for example, even with my mentee, I think eventually she asked me for my address and she mentioned why. So it could be oh, I wanted to send you something special. Can you share with me your mailing address? And once you build that rapport, then it's okay. You don't sound creepy. So make sure you build that relationship first.
I know I always have to be why do you want it? No, I think it's really good to be I want to send you a small something to thank you for X. The context, I think, will definitely chip at the creepiness. And also, I don't know how many guys are reading the chats, but there's so many good comments and advice and stories in there as well. So love that you guys are sharing all those insights of ways you guys have navigated as well. But generally, Jessalin, what's your cadence in terms of following up?
I would say, yeah, I was going to actually touch upon that because I know someone asked about the follow-ups. I think, and I don't know if there's a rule of thumb, but my own rule of thumb is not reaching out to someone who doesn't respond more than 3 times. I would say the first time, if they don't respond, and this goes for networking in general, don't take anything personal, because you never know what's happening at their end. Especially now as with COVID and we're working from home, there's so many things happening in people's lives. So don't take it personal if they don't respond the first time. I would say maybe wait 2 to 3 weeks or so to follow up and just say oh, just checking in, if you have time. Or in the follow-up, you can say oh, I saw this article that you're featured in. Or if it's someone who speaks at events often, not to say stalk them, but go to that event. And then you could follow up with them to say, oh, I attended that event and it was really great. I learned and then insert the insight that you learned from them. Or if they recently got promoted in their job, send them a note on LinkedIn to say, amazing, I saw that you got a new job, like congrats, let me know once you settle in, and we can catch up to schedule a call. But don't reach out to someone like 5 times if they don't respond. I mean, I would say then move on to the next person and don't take it personal. I mean, there's probably so many people that haven't responded to me, and then I'm like, okay, don't bother, move on to the next person.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, these are all great questions, and I really appreciate this networking event. I hope you guys did too. I'll have Jessalin close us out and talk about a couple of our upcoming events that we would love to see you guys all at.
Oh yeah, let me share my screen again. So we have on October 21st, we have Finding Your Voice, where Kenny will be teaching everyone on presentation skills. It'll be a really interactive 2-hour workshop where there'll be breakout rooms and you really learn the skills of the presentation skills. And this one will be really great because you can actually incorporate this into networking, your communication styles, and he's a really great facilitator. So you'll really enjoy this one. And then keep networking. So find that networking deck that we put in the chat. We'll also email it in a follow-up email, and then join our private LinkedIn group. Yeah, thanks everyone. Feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to even have virtual coffee with any of you.
And good luck.
Take care.